Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's Ryan from the Indie Music Academy, and with me today I have a longtime friend of the channel, Chris SD. Chris is an awesome guy. He's an award-winning producer. He's worked on 5 albums that have won Juno Awards, and being Canadian, he is Canadian. That's the Canada Grammys, their equivalent version of that, and he has had 7 nominations, including Engineer of the Year. So we're super lucky to have Chris here, and with his extensive industry experience and contacts, which he loves to share his contacts, he has helped artists land record deals, find management and booking agents, and of course, the topic of today has helped artists like you land sync licensing gigs for TV and film. So to date, the artists that he has helped get music into TV and film have collectively earned hundreds of thousands of dollars in upfront sync fees and back-end royalties, which is what it's all about. Give a warm welcome to Chris in the chat if you're with me. Also, let me know where you're tuning in. But Chris, thanks so much for coming back on the channel again. Our last video was super popular. We did a Q&A last time, which we will do again today. So Chris, welcome. Thanks so much for being here again, man.
Oh, Ryan, thanks so much for having me. It's great. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for this topic, sync licensing is something that I see all the time. I get emails about it. I see people comment under videos about other topics about sync licensing. It's something that is just so important for artists to understand. And my first question for you today, just to start us off, why has sync licensing become so popular, specifically amongst independent musicians? What is so special about it for us?
That's a great question. I asked myself actually that same question when I first heard of it, right? I've heard of music licensing and I'm like, sounds complicated, sounds corporate, sounds like it's a distraction from trying to get your music out there. Like it literally, I thought that doesn't make any sense to me. And then I started hearing, this is like right when it first started, right? When it became kind of cool for indie artists to be in shows and movies and ads. And I started hearing of these like musicians getting these sync placements, as they're called. Yeah. And that meant just getting their music into a show, movie, or ad, getting into TV and film. And they were getting like these huge checks. Like they were basically like, I knew one personally who like got a song placed and they're like, oh, my rent's paid for a year. I'm like, what? And it was just like, I had to start looking into this. It's like, how does this whole thing work? Well, let me get this straight. A TV studio or movie studio basically says, hey, we need music for our shows, or movie, whatever they're working on. And we're going to pay you money to use your song in this show or movie or ad or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, it's very specific to like the time you're licensing it to them to say, you can use it for this amount of time in this show and it can re-air, but you can't use it outside of that. The artist continues to own the copyright. And it was just like this, like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. But the biggest thing, I think that the most important part of sync licensing and why it's such a buzzword and why everybody's into it is because it's such amazing exposure. It's not just the money, it's just, you get all this exposure. Like I just helped 2 people I worked with, 2 songwriters that I work with, get 5 tracks into this year's Cannes Film Festival winning film, Anora. And, I went and saw that in a theater here in Tennessee. And, it's got Golden Globe buzz right now. It might have Oscar buzz in January. It's a really good film. And you can imagine the exposure those artists are getting. Like, and it's going to air, now it hit screens. Then it's going to go on streaming, right? Every time it streams, those artists are going to get royalty checks, for that. And plus just this huge fan base, because people are Shazamming it, like, who is this and all that stuff. So people have just landed in the charts from one good sync placement. I have another member who they got written up in Billboard magazine. They had festivals calling them. Their Spotify spins went off the charts because everyone's like, Shazamming their music and then saying, well, cool, this is great. And then they start hitting Spotify, and then Spotify sees the algorithm, sees all these spins happening, and it starts pushing out their other songs, So sync licensing is such a hot topic because it's really fast. What can happen to you can be really quick, and it's relatively easy to do. You know, you're not trying to build your fan base online. You're not trying to, get into a van, like the old days, and tour and stuff like that. You can literally be working in your bedroom studio, basement studio, whatever. And if you do it the right way, you can get music to the people who put music into TV and film, and it can just happen like that. So that's the big deal, and why I started pursuing this. Just a last little bit, a lot of people, I'm sort of known as like the go-to sync guy, and I it's funny, I didn't start out in this as being like enamored with sync licensing. I was literally a producer. I worked with major label artists. I worked with indie artists, and the indie artists that I worked with had music that was just as good as the majors. And so we used to work really hard on the record, and the record would go off into the ether and crickets. Nothing would happen, They didn't have the managers, the agents, and labels propelling their career along. So it became this thing of like, how do I help these records do better? And part of it was selfish, because I was, spending a lot of time on these records with them. And I was like, man, I want something to happen with these. I was doing great with the major label stuff, but I was like, I want these indie artists to do well. And it evolved into me really focusing only on indie. I don't work with major labels anymore. And I only work with indie songwriters, and I try to get their music out there to see the light of day, because the vast majority of all the music that's out there, right? Everyone and their dog has a record out. The vast majority of the music is never going to go anywhere beyond, the small fan base or friends and family and stuff. And I want indie music to have its time, the time it deserves to be heard. And for people here on the call to be able to connect with like a global audience and get the attention the music deserves, fulfill the thing that they feel they were called to do. Right. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Like those are the people I serve. And that's the accomplishments that I want to see. And sync licensing simply happened to be the best vehicle that I saw to do it. And it was the hardest one, but I got all these contacts over the years and then was able to figure out, all I have to do is introduce indie songwriters straight to the gatekeepers. Those are music supervisors, they're called. They get hired by the studios to pick the music for TV and film. And I would introduce the indie songwriters, to the music supervisors, who would then place the music in TV and film. And that's how all the kind of the magic has happened around Sync Songwriter in the last few years.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I super love your heart for indies. And just to clarify, because I'm sure that people watching are wondering this exact thing, the music that you're talking about is original music, original songs, right? That they create out of their heart. It's their creativity at work. We're not talking about library music, right?
Yeah. So let me be really, sort of touch on that. I think it's really important. There's a right way and a wrong way to do sync licensing. And I see a lot of musicians and songwriters fall into this trap, and that is, a lot of people think that, well, first they think, I just have to get the contact information of a supervisor and email them my music. I love my music. My fans love it. They're going to love it. They're going to put it into a show. So that may be true. That may all be true. But the problem is they just cannot, they don't receive emails like that are unsolicited. They're inundated. I know this. I know tons of them. And they get like 200 emails a day. And that's just from publishers and labels. And those are actually their go-to people,
Yeah.
And then they get a bunch from, other people or musicians or whatever, just emailing them cold emails, just sending them, and they go whoop into the junk folder, because they just don't have time to answer all these emails. And then there's the issue that they don't know if you've got your copyright figured out. Do you have all the paperwork done? They can get fired. Like if you get a song to them and they're like, yeah, I'd love to use your song. Do you own the copyright? And you're like, oh yeah, everything's cool. They're like, okay, great. And then the song goes in the movie and it's already baked into the movie and the release date's coming up. And then out of the woodwork, someone from your band that maybe broke up, I'm making this up, comes out of the woodwork and says, I was in the room that day and, I added that hook and I'm part of the copyright and I'm fighting this. Well, guess who gets fired, right? The music supervisor. So they want to go to their go-to people. They don't really trust indie songwriters. And so that's why you can't just connect with them directly. That's a huge thing. So the alternatives, and a lot of people have heard about this, right? You can go into music libraries or you can get a sync agent, right? One of those two. And those two are like middlemen, right? They're middle people who basically you sign with them. You put your music in a library, or you put it with a sync agent, and the sync agent will pitch your music to the supervisors because they have the relationships. Or the library is a big repository of music, and then you put your music in there, and supervisors can go there and shop around like at a store, and then pick your song, right?
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. They do the work for you. You got to give up half your sync fee. Usually that's the money you get up front. And you got to give away half your publishing sometimes, the publishing income, not the copyright, but just like that's basically your PRO royalties that will come in the back end. You got to give them half of that typically. So you've got these two vehicles that sound promising, right? So it's great for the sync agent and it's great for the library because they've got all this music. Like they've got thousands to millions of tracks. Sony has 5 million tracks in it. So you've got these people who have all this music, and if a supervisor comes there, they're probably going to have something for them. Just the odds, right? Like all that music that's there. The supervisor likes it because when the supervisor goes to the library or the sync agent, it's like going into a big box store to find something. They're going to find something, right? Because there's all this music. They're going to find something they're looking for. It's terrible for the songwriter because the songwriter, you are in there with thousands or millions of tracks. So you're like a needle in a haystack. It's like playing a lottery, right? The odds of you being picked. And there's an easy way. You don't have to take it from me. An easy way to test this is literally ask every musician you know who's in a library or with a sync agent and find out how many of them are getting consistent sync placements. I already know the answer. And, and so you might find one or two like, oh, I got a placement, maybe someone got two, or, if they got really lucky. Almost all of them will be none, zero. All their songs are in there collecting dust. Nothing is happening, right? So then the question is, well, okay, well then as an indie songwriter, I'm basically like out of the game, right? There's no way that I can get my music into TV and film unless I have a label deal or I'm on the front burner with an agent. That can work. If you have a hit song or something and you're on the front burner, they're going to pitch you like crazy. So here you are, right? So that is why I created Sync Songwriter, is because I thought, how am I going to get the indie artists I work with in the studio? How am I going to get their music into TV and film reliably? I don't want them to go through these middlemen where they're taking half the money and you're just dependent on whether they decide to shop you, which for most people's never, right? And well, they might shop once in a while, but it doesn't land, and it's like a lottery. So I thought what I need to do is go straight to the music supervisors. I need to start forming relationships with them, the actual people. Jump right over the middlemen, right? And go straight to the gatekeepers. So I started doing that and building relationships up, and gradually started getting more of a network, more music got into TV and film. And, the years went by and I got more and more of these contacts. And then I started a program called the Art of the Song Pitch and stuff. And people can come in and then get connected directly to these music supervisors. And that's what I do, is essentially I'm like kind of a glorified doorman in a way. Like I teach everybody what they need to know before I introduce them. That's critical. You got to know what you're doing. It's not rocket science, but you got to have your ducks in a row. You just got to know what to do. And then I introduce artists, and that's how we get all the results we get. Like I was just last week talking to another member who's got his 3rd placement in Grey's Anatomy, another one 4 placements in Will Trent. It goes on and on and on. So that's how we've gotten so much success, is by skipping over the middlemen and going straight to the source.
Absolutely, dude. And what you said is totally true. Susan just commented, what do you think about these sync agencies? I haven't seen a single placement yet. So you kind of read her mind there with your story. And then Lauren is saying that she's feeling exactly what you're saying, frustrated that all of the amazing, talented indie artists just don't see the light of day. So it's awesome. Like as the doorman, you're like leaving the door open, holding the door open for these independent artists to just get in the room with these music supervisors. And I wanted to ask you, because some of us are more familiar with what it takes to do sync. Obviously, you have a structured program that walks artists through everything step by step. But just as a quick overview, how do artists get started? What does an artist need maybe to collect or pre-prepare to get their music into TV and film to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the only thing you need to know how to do, honestly, if you've got this, if you don't have this, you got some work to do. If you know how to do this, then you are already on the path ready to go. You just have to know how to write good songs. If you can write good songs, I'm not talking about producing or recording yet. Literally talking about taking your guitar and sitting in your living room or your piano or whatever you used to write on, beatbox, whatever. If you can write good songs, not great songs, good songs, then you're in. There's something that a lot of people don't know, and they think that they have to write for sync licensing, right? They think, oh, all the stuff you hear on TV and film, you have to actually write for it. It actually is the opposite. So yeah, some people do write for sync and are successful for sure. The majority of the songs that get into TV and film are authentic songs, meaning that the supervisors are looking for authenticity. They tell me this all the time. They don't want something that sounds like it was created for something. They literally want the music that you already write from your heart and soul for your fans or whoever you're writing about or whatever you're writing about. And that's the stuff they want because that moves the emotion on the screen. The authentic feeling, the emotion is what they're after, right? They're trying to create this like emotional response in the audience with their show, movie, or ad. So if you've got that infused inside your music just because you wrote it honestly, that's what they're after. So it's got to be such a relief that you can literally write what you want. So there's two ways in sync to go about it. One is you write for sync, and then you try to, like, you see a target and you say, well, I love this show and I'd love to get music in there. I'm going to sit down and write something that sounds a lot like everything else in the show. And then you write for it. People do that if they're really good. They can get that into those shows. But it's harder to do because of the authenticity. You've got to be a jack of all trades and really good at all your trades. So kind of a master of all trades. And it's a much more difficult, and it's a minority of musicians who can do that. The rest of the time, the strategy is you write your music, and instead of writing it for a show or whatever, you write your music for you. You write it for your muse, whoever that is, whatever that is, and then you find the shows, movies or ads, that are looking for that kind of music. That's called targeting. That's something I teach and all that. Don't have time to get into it here. So the first thing you got to have is just to write good songs. If you can write good songs, that's literally 80% of it, honestly. If you can't write good songs yet, go learn how to write good songs. Take some courses if you got to, or just spend more time playing and practicing writing songs. So that's the first thing. Sounds super simple, but it's literally that simple. You just have to have good songs. And then the second one is you have to be able to record or get your music recorded so it sounds above the threshold of, like, it's got to sound like everything else getting into TV and film. Now, if you watch lots of different shows and see movies, it's not all like slick hi-fi like stuff, There's a lot of like super indie sounding stuff. There's all kinds of music, right? There's a home for every genre of song. There's a home for every style of music. You can write Tibetan throat singing. You can write meditation music, show tunes, besides like the big ones, hip hop and country and rock and pop, right? You can write all kinds of different stuff, and there's a spot for them. You just have to know who's looking for it when they're looking for it, which is something, we can talk about a little bit later. So, but you got to be able to record at a level that is like, good. Again, it doesn't have to be great. You don't have to sound like the latest Billie Eilish record. You just have to like have music that's like, this sounds good, and most importantly, has that emotion that you've got in your music. So literally that is what you need. The third ingredient, of course, is what we just talked about. And the last and third one is being able to connect with the people who can make it happen. How do you connect with the right people in TV and film, right? That's the big question. And that's the big, huge challenge. How do you climb that mountain? And so that's why, again, I started Sync Songwriters to help songwriters do that, is to connect directly with the gatekeepers.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And the opportunities, or I should rephrase this to say, instead of changing yourself to be, watered down for all opportunities, it's so much better just to be the most potent version of yourself and then match what's best for you. I love that. It's so smart. Honestly, that's good advice for so many different
Yeah.
facets of
Ryan,
music creation.
yeah, can I append something to that very
Yeah.
quickly? Is a lot of people think music supervisors, these like unicorns, out there who are, in Hollywood or whatever, as the imagination goes and stuff. Maybe they have suit and ties on in your head. They're the coolest, most down to earth, nicest people that you'd ever want to hang out with. They love music. They're either in a band, they have friends in a band, they love music. They're chill. They're great. They're just like us, us music folks, and they want to help indie musicians. They much rather give money to an indie artist than they would a library or an agent or a label or a publishing company. They tell me all the time, and they love meeting them. Like through Sing Songwriter, they meet, artists all the time, like, songwriters, that they get to meet them face to face, and they get to hear their story and get to know them and form relationships with them and stuff like that. So that is the cool thing to just remember. Like it's not like a super corporate thing. It's actually totally the opposite of that.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. So now that we have an accurate image of what a music supervisor is like, how do they approach choosing the music or choosing the artist for their project, right? Because they have a boss too, right? They're working on a film or a show, right? And so they're trying to get their job done. What's in their mind, and how are they going to perform their search?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. So essentially what it is that they are hired by the studios, right? They work directly with the director and the producers, and their job is to go find music and bring music back to them. Sometimes a director will already have ideas in their mind, right? And they're like, let's pick like, a scenario that's you've heard before, but it's like not that usual. Director comes in, they get this big budget, right, for the music, and they're like, I want Led Zeppelin, and I would just want Led Zeppelin in here, and I want this known band and this known band, and there's maybe a spot or two left, and they've got this big music budget, and they're spending like six figures on these songs, right, easily, when I think I got the figure right. I think it was $250,000 that Mad Men paid for a Beatles song in like 2012 somewhere. It was
Wow.
like this crazy record that was set. It's 250,000. If it was 150,000, kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But I remember it was just a
Nice.
ridiculous amount of money that they just had to have the song.
Mm.
And then they blew their whole budget, of course, on that song. They didn't have a lot of money left. So normally the way it works, why I'm going into this money stuff is why I'm going to explain how they pick indie music, is that they get this music budget for the year, right? The supervisor says, here's your budget for music. They would much rather pay you $10,000 for one of your songs than $100,000 for a major label song. It's just cheaper, right? So that's the real reason that indie music is so popular. It'd be nice to think that they're like, we want to support indie music and stuff all the time. There's that element in there, but it doesn't pay the rent for anybody, right? It's the movie studios want to make money. Everyone's a business. They want to make money. So they're thinking about it in really pragmatic terms. And they're like, well, we can get this killer indie music for like a tenth of the price, because I'm sure you'd be happy to accept, even 5,000, right? For a sing placement in a show. I mean, why not? So that is the real reason. And so that is the big motivation to go for supervisors to go after indie music. Now, how they pick the actual music comes down to their artistry, the same way that you're a songwriter and you're writing music, your music from the muse, you're writing it from your artistry. They're approaching their shows the same way. They're like looking at the footage and they're thinking about what kind of music do I want in there? Once in a while, the director might have a placeholder song on there. They might put the Led Zeppelin song in there that they say, well, we can't afford that. But can you find something that's got the same emotion? Doesn't sound like it, but it's got the same emotion, So they might look, they got a Zeppelin song in there. They might end up with a heavy techno track, that's got the same vibe. So the music supervisor literally goes out and searches for the kind of music that's going to fit in there. The key here for everybody on this call is that the supervisors go after people that they know already, right? They're called their go-to people. So they go after people who they have relationships with, and those will be labels, publishers, agents, and libraries as well, and people like me, sing-songwriter. I get their briefs, firsthand briefs. They ask me what I've got. I don't have anything. I'm not writing anything. I pass all that on to the songwriters I work with. I'm not the middleman. I just introduce them so that they can, talk directly face to face themselves. So that's the key, right? Is a big key of this. It's about who you know. We all kind of know that. And sometimes we kind of think, man, I hope it's not like that, but unfortunately it is like that in this industry. You might get lucky. They might stumble across you somehow, or you get discovered. They're at a show and you're there, you are playing and they love you. I mean, but again, lottery, right? The real way things work are relationships. It's about knowing the right people and just them trusting you. It's not nefarious. It's not schmoozy. It's not like there's no underhanded weird stuff. It's just like you and your friends, honestly. If a friend surprises you on a street, hey man, how you doing? Right? Your reaction is totally different than a stranger comes up and goes, excuse me, right? Totally different reaction. We're all the same. We want to trust our kind of circle of friends, or the places we buy things, or the shows we watch. We're picky. We have to be, right? We're just not open to everything. We can't be, and we can't trust everybody. That's impossible. So they're exactly the same way. They're just trying to do a job. And so if you can get in the door with them, that's where the magic happens.
Totally. And I kind of want to highlight something that you said that honestly even surprised me. And this will lead into a question I saw in the chat.
Yeah.
But I thought it was so interesting that you said that genre isn't necessarily the categorization that music supervisors hold themselves fixed to, right? Because I feel like as musicians, and I hear this all the time with the marketing campaigns that I run, getting in playlists, right? We want to match genres so much as artists. We want to find the perfect fit. But for the rest of the world that maybe are, more open-minded, right? They're focusing more on the feel or the vibe, or maybe just the energy level, right? Is that true in sync as well?
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so genre is going to definitely come into play if you've got a show that's set, say, in New Orleans, in the bayou. You know
Or
what I
a
mean?
period piece.
Yeah, or a period piece. Yeah, it's in the 80s or whatever. You're definitely they're going to be forced to use music. You're not going to see a disco track in the New Orleans bayou thing, probably, unless they go to Baton Rouge and they go dancing, somewhere. Totally, you might see that. Most shows, though, you're right. They don't care about the style or whatever of the music, is as long as it's got the right feeling and so on. So they're gonna be influenced by, it's a country bar, they're gonna play country music, But then the characters end up in Baltimore. I don't know. They're driving along going to Baltimore, and there's another kind of music that's getting played there, And there's all these different things. Some shows have very sort of distinct sounds, and they do stick to kind of general styles. Other shows do not, right? But the most important thing that applies to a songwriter is you don't have to worry about any of that. You just do what you do. If you're really eclectic, to write your eclectic stuff. If you're really focused on one sound, do that.
Yeah.
The only thing you got to remember is finding a home for the music that you write.
Yeah.
Now, a quick tip: if you write eclectic stuff, if you write a lot of different styles, say you write blues and you got a punk band and you just love disco, as we were just talking about. It's just who you are, what you like to do. You're good at it, you love it, and you're pretty good at those styles. So instead of going after TV and film with this kind of, basket full of different fruit, and saying, well, here's what I'm selling, or here's what I've got, right? And in the market or whatever you're doing. You basically compartmentalize them, or you put them in silos, as I like to say, is you take your oranges and you put all your oranges in one silo, and your apples in another silo, and your plums in another silo, so that your disco stuff is in one spot, your punk rock stuff's in another spot, and your blues stuff is in another silo. And then you kind of, I'm getting ahead of things here, but you're going to sort of target two particular opportunities for those things. You're going to do it separately. So the blues is like its own thing. It's almost like you're a label, and you've signed these three different artists that are still you. You're the blues you, and the punk you, and the disco you, right? But you're going to kind of shop them separately to different opportunities. You're going to find all the opportunities that are looking for disco. And you're only going to do that with the disco silo. Then you're going to do the same thing with the blues, and you do the same thing with the punk. You're not going to bring them all and give them all to a music supervisor, because the shotgun approach does not work. Okay. It just, you can't just, if you've got great music, the best they can do is like, well, I'm not looking for anything like that right now. I don't know, I'll put it in my library and put 5 stars beside it. And if something comes up sometime or working on a show where I need it, maybe I'll look back in a year or two, You want to give them what they're looking for, when they're looking for it. That's the key, right? So
that's so good. And then Alice was asking a follow-up on that. What about instrumental music? She composes a classical folkish with violin and clarinet, a little off the beaten track. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's honestly no off the beaten track with instrumentation or style. As I was saying before, if you do meditation music, there's spots. There's always a scene with the meditation studio, or someone's having an epiphany, or like whatever it is. There's a spot for meditation music. You wouldn't think there is, but you'd be shocked how much meditation music gets synced. We're talking about like I wish I could remember off the top of my head the number of billions of dollars the sync industry is worth right now, and they're projecting it to go up by 30%. 30% by 2030. Like that's crazy. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So this is a runaway train. I mean, it's this beast with this voracious appetite for music that's just is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Just more and more and more stuff's being made on YouTube and all this other stuff. So that anything that you make, right? Classical arrangements with like, minimalistic instruments, or maybe you've got a electric harp or who knows what. It doesn't matter. It's just a question of finding the home for that. Now, the one piece of advice though, is that if you're a composer, if you write more like soundscape stuff, like where it's more of like a feeling and less of a melody and a structure, that you're better off going the composer route. I can't help in those cases. That's a very, very different thing. I don't want to get into the differences too much here right now. It's a long story. But you should do some research online and figure out how to become a composer. You're going to want to start with like indie films, student films, even, go to a local film school and start composing. And that means you're writing to picture, and you're creating soundscapes and vibe and all of that, and you might have some melodic constructs in there, but it's not really focused on that. It's mainly like about creating a mood. If you write instrumental music that is not soundscapes, and you have a melody, like even if it was like a Beethoven concerto, you can follow the motifs, you can follow the melodies, you can follow what those are placed all the time. And then the very last thing is that a lot of placements are actually instrumental versions of songs. So the two things that you need to have when you are submitting for sync licensing is you need your full mix, right? That's your vocal and, the song. And then an instrumental only, where you're stripping the vocal out on a mix and you're just giving the instrumental. And that gives them the opportunity to cut between them. So if they want to put your music in while dialogue is happening on the screen, they can play the instrumental. And then say the scene is ending, one of the characters gets up and walks away in silence for like, 7 seconds. Boom, they can cut straight to your chorus, right? Where you're singing and boom, and then out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, along those lines, I saw a question from Elaine. She was asking if having an artist name or submitting these songs with the artist name is beneficial, or would you hide your artist name? Does that matter?
It doesn't matter as much as some people might think it does. It's supervisors like the fact that if you're being at the very least a songwriter, they're more inclined to want to help people who are, semi-serious about their music, and not just like, oh, I just banged this thing together in GarageBand one weekend, and I'm not really a musician, but they much prefer trying to support and they relate more to people who are, I have a band, or I go play gigs, or I write songs a lot, or I have a collection, I've got a new record coming out, or I'm just starting, but I'm dedicating like half the time to my music or whatever. They much prefer supporting that kind of person than a tire kicker sort of in music. Nothing wrong with music as a hobby. But they're more interested in that, in which case the artist name can certainly help, right? So that
Mm.
can become a thing, is it helps brand you a little bit. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, as I was saying, as much as you might think, because it literally comes down to the song. That's all they care about, is like, they're not going to care. That's basically it. If
Yeah.
the song is going to work and it's cleared and you own the copyright and there's no surprises and it sounds great, they want to pay you for it. So
Mhm. That's awesome. In fact, so let's flip that question on its head. What are some of the things that an artist can accidentally do that would prevent them from being chosen by music supervisors? Like what are the bad mistakes that we'd want to avoid?
yeah, sure. So the first one is pretty obvious to most people. I'm sure, one nice thing about musicians and having lived in the music world for a long time is I'm being a bit prejudiced here, in favor of musicians, but I just feel like musicians generally, I just find them a little more selfless, a little, I don't know. They just understand music as like this kind of not just a language, but like a way of living or something.
Mhm.
And it's a really unifying kind of universal thing with musicians. Like I love the musical crowd. I didn't get into accounting. I like accountants. I have an accountant, that does my taxes once a year, whatever. And he's a nice guy, but I'm not as compelled to hang out with accountants as much. I find my joy in sort of the group of musicians. That's the thing I like. And so, you know, all of that comes down to like, if you're going to be talking to a music supervisor and you're being pretentious or you're being demanding or whatever, you're quickly going to end up on the blacklist. You definitely don't want to be that person, right? And sometimes that does happen in music. We all know that, right? There's the odd prima donna and people, and yeah, sometimes it's deserved, I guess. I mean, they're really, really good. You kind of forgive some of that because it's like, yeah, you are really, really good. But honestly, nobody really loves that. And all the great people that I've ever met, I've had the good fortune of hanging out with Sheryl Crow, Bo Diddley, Brian Wilson, and the list goes on. Like just be able to hang out with and talk to some of these people, Chris Christopherson, super cool people, right? And my theory is they got there because they are just good people, uh, people as well, right?
Mhm.
As being
Mhm.
great songwriters and great performers. So you want to be that person. You want to be agreeable and easy to work with and rational and all of that good stuff. So that's number one, right? Number two is don't do stuff that's not industry standard. So in my program, which we're not talking about here today, is that it's basically I teach people how to what to do, essentially. Like here's how to do it the right way. Here's how to talk to them. Here's what you got to have with your music, and here's how to set up your files, and here's what your production. And I review songs and help people with their production, and I kind of get them ready. It's like a prep school to get them ready for the job interview or something. It's like, here's what we're going to do, and straighten your tie, and do all the right things, and don't say this, and say this kind of stuff. And it's not like scripted or anything. It's literally like how to avoid the pitfalls. And if
Mhm.
you don't understand the industry norms and you don't understand the lingo and you don't know how things work, they're less willing to work with you. And that's why we have such success at Sing Songwriters, because everybody comes out a pro. They don't have to learn everything, just enough to basically be a songwriter and know what's what and how it works, and how to go about things. So that's the second thing I would say that's really big. And I'd say those are the two top ones, honestly.
Yeah, because I mean, there's no limit on genre. There's no limit on song length.
No,
It's like as long as the music's good,
and you're
you're really
good.
just free to be creative.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're a
and
good
you're a good
person.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, not making enemies. Yeah, and kind of along those lines too. If you're an artist that can't do it all themselves yet, like maybe you don't have good mixing skills yet, or maybe you use a co-writer, or maybe you have a producer that helps you with recording. Does that disqualify you, or is working with the team is totally fine too, right?
Oh yeah. You could have a guest vocal on your track. You don't even have to sing it. Seriously. Yeah. You just have to have the documentations. Remember, always get a work for hire For
Oh yeah.
everything that
Yeah.
you do when you hire anybody, always, always, always get a work for hire. And that's
Mhm.
a contract document. Most of you know what that is. But
Mhm.
if you don't, you need to find out. And you're best off not to just download one off the web. You're better off to pay a lawyer a couple $100 and get them to draft one that you can use for the rest of your career. And it's
Mm.
literally, it has your publishing company name in there or your personal name. You don't have to have a company, and you can just like send it to the person that played guitar or did whatever, or your producer or your engineer, and just get them to sign off. Say, I acknowledge I don't own any of the copyright. I literally got paid to do what I do, and that's the contract, and that's it. So
Yeah, yeah. And that's your evidence when the music supervisors ask you, do you own this track? And you can have a stack of papers, drop it on their desk. It's like, yes, here's the proof.
yeah, yeah, and mostly they're not going to actually ask you for the papers. They're going
Mhm.
to ask you if you've got them, which comes
Okay.
again back to that trust thing, right? So if you're
Mhm.
an indie musician out there and you're just mailing out cold, like you got some contact information, you're just mailing it out, the trust level from a supervisor is super, super low, right? That's,
Mhm.
besides the sheer volume of emails they get, they just don't respond because they're just like, I just only work with my go-to people.
Yeah.
That's the huge advantage of going through either a middle person, but the challenges in that, right? Or what we do at Sing Songwriter. Everyone, we take them through the whole program. When they come out the other side, the supervisors totally trust you. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. In fact, I saw a good comment from Jeff. He was asking for sync. Does it matter if the songs have been released on Spotify prior, or does it have to be a private library? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, great question. That comes up a lot, actually. It doesn't matter one way or the other. The only time it matters is that if let's use Billie Eilish again. You remember that one that they wrote for the James Bond flick, that song?
Mm. Yeah.
They didn't release that before the movie, right? So
Mhm.
that was technically a sync placement, right? They got that song into a movie and they wrote it for the movie, which is a little bit different than what we're talking about. But they didn't release it before because the movie studio wanted to use that as a thing, as a novelty thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
now
A
you get the
marketing tool.
track, and yeah,
Yeah.
the track's released and it's on the radio, the movie's out, and all that stuff. For anybody other than Billie Eilish and company, your doesn't matter if you release it or not. But there's one really important thing in here that's to know is that before you get a sync placement, you don't have to, I'm telling you, you have to get it out on every streaming platform you can. Get it out on your website, kind of release it, have it findable. People need to find you because here's
Yeah.
what happens. You get your song into this musician I worked with, Grey's Anatomy tune, right? Gets it into Grey's Anatomy, right? It's a beautiful song. Usually Grey's Anatomy songs are highly curated. They usually have they're playing like 2 minutes of the song, or if not the whole thing, usually at the end or something like that. Everybody's watching Grey's Anatomy who loves those scenes at the end. And here's a new, beautiful song they've never heard of, is Shazamming it. They're on
Yeah.
Google typing the lyrics in, like, who is this? If they can't find you, you've blown it, because you're going to get this huge, huge swell, this fan base. Like you're going to have thousands potentially of people, maybe hundreds of thousands, all searching for your music at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And it's got to be out there. It's got to be on Spotify. It's got to be in all these places. So my advice is release your music, especially if you're submitting something for sync placements that there's a really good chance of it getting in because you have the relationship now with the supervisor, for example, then you got to get it on the web somewhere because
Yeah.
otherwise you're going to just blow this incredible opportunity for exposure.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to have a place for the traffic to go. That makes so much sense. Yeah. And Elaine, yeah, had the same question. Fantastic. So glad we talked about that. This is a great one I see in the chat. What about if the song is signed to a label? Does that hurt the chances of being selected, or is that just more about getting it cleared properly?
Yeah. So the other part of a music supervisor's job is called clearance. And
Mm.
literally they got paperwork they got to do. So when they want to use your song, they got to, ask about the copyright and the work for hires and the split sheets and all that other stuff. And they want to know a bunch of stuff, right, about your music and everything like that. That's part of the clearance job that that they do. And so the same thing when they go after a label or a publisher or anything like that is their job is to, go to the label and get the who owns the copyright, who wrote it, who owns the master, blah blah blah, and all this other stuff, and get all the paperwork in order. It doesn't matter, honestly. There's songs that get placed that have like 5-7 writers on it, partly owned by a publishing company, and a version that was signed by a label. Like, they can get really complicated. It's not fun for the supervisors. Like, they like to have things that are like, they call it one stop. Here's a quick tip for you. It's just one of the things you need to know is if you have a track that's one stop, that means that they just have to go to you for the clearance, meaning that you have all the information, all the documentation, and you can sign off on that. So for example, say you co-wrote a song and your co-writer knows nothing about music licensing. They're not even interested in it, but you're like, this could be really good for us. And then you are, say, NSYNC songwriter. I introduce you to some supervisors, and then you get these relationships going. And then one of them gets back to you and says, hey, we want to use that song that you gave me. We were on that call together. You gave me the song. I want to be able to use that. Is it good to go? I've got this thing. It's like happening tomorrow. Sometimes these deadlines are super tight. And you can say, yeah, because you have a written contract with your co-writer that says, I'm the point person. Like, you're the one stop, meaning you don't have to go back and, I got to wait till she's off work, and, her cat's at the vet, I can't get a hold of her until tomorrow. And, there's none of that, right? So you can say, yep, we're good to go. I've got the paperwork, and you're one stop. And the supervisors love that because that means quick, easy, clear, basically.
That's such a good tip. I don't think artists even realize that they can be the decision maker for the whole band or the decision maker for the whole team, which is really, usually in a band, there's the person that kind of wants to take on the admin anyways, and everyone else is like, yeah, I'll just write songs. Yeah. So it's super smart to take advantage of the document and kind of leverage that the legal system really to land syncs faster. That's really slick. I saw one in the this is a good question from Patrick, who obviously he doesn't want to pay for a how-to program. So other than joining Sync Songwriter, what would you say is the best way to get in front of decision makers?
Yeah. So if you don't want to pay for a program, you don't want to get into a library or an agency who you have to pay anyway on the back end, and your chances are super low. So I don't advise that. So the only other way I would say is do it the way I did it. You can totally do it the way I did it. I didn't pay anybody to do what I did. And I went to conferences and more conferences. And once I got to know more supervisors, I started getting, it was easier for me because I was already a producer with some, cred under my belt. So, I'd worked with some artists and I'd get invited to parties and stuff like that. So that's how all that happened. So you could literally move to LA and you could do the same thing. You could just spend a couple of years in LA, going out to everything, trying to meet more and more people. When you go to a conference, it's tough because, if you've been there, there's usually a long lineup, right? Where the supervisor standing there after the panel. And then there's a long lineup of artists, and some of them have these cards. The odd one might still have a CD, and they're handing everything and they're shaking hands. And at the end of the night, the supervisor doesn't remember who they met. They're just like, oh, and they got this bag full of stuff. They go back to the hotel. I don't think they're going to sort through it. So it takes time to do that. So you can totally do it that way. And, the reason that I created the artists that I work with, obviously I make a living at what I do, right? That's what I do. And I decided to do this full time. I decided to stop producing records and being able to do it. So I I bought this little place in the Smoky Mountains, and I got to pay my mortgage and all that. And, I'm just like you. I got expenses. I've got things to do. I've got a daughter, and we're just trying to live life. I need to have a job, right? So I decided to do the thing that I love to do, and that's helping indie artists, right? And I get paid. You pay me to do that. So the question really comes down to not whether you have to pay for it, because you got to pay for your utilities, you got to pay for your food at the grocery store, you got to pay your mechanic and your dentist, you got to pay for everything, right? The question is, are you getting value, the right value for what you're paying? That's the big question. It's not whether you want to pay. It's not whether you have to pay, because you don't have to. You can do what I did. It's crazy hard, man. Put it blatantly. You're going to spend 2-3 years trying trying to do what I did. And so, and I created a shortcut. So the question is, if you don't ever have to work with me, obviously. So you just pick the person or the avenue that you want to do it. You might go online and try to cobble together stuff for free, there's a lot of information out there that's not right. And there's a lot of dead ends and it's difficult. And if you're not actually in the industry, it's hard to know and all that, but you can do it. The reason we pay for things is because we see the value. We see like, oh, I get this for that. And I know it's real. So if we can make that conclusion, if we say, okay, I'm willing to pay for stuff if I get the value, because if you pay somebody something and you make 10 times more money from that, that's obvious, right? You do it. So the question comes down to, in the end, are they real? Like, are these people trying to rip me off? Are these people? And you should ask all those questions. You should be asking the question about me. I mean, I'm here with Ryan. I know that you trust Ryan, and Ryan, we're friends. So you got a good weight of Ryan there saying, Chris is the right guy. But, if anytime you get into anything, you need to ask those questions, because the music industry, it hasn't changed. It's full of sharks. There's all kinds of people that are after your money in all kinds of different ways, who are not delivering, who are not walking the talk, And if you find people, though, who walk the talk and who deliver that, those are good people to be working with, because they can advance you so fast and so far relative to the amount you might pay them. Like you might pay them this much and end up with this much of whatever that is, whether it's money, fame, exposure, fan base, all of a sudden you're an opening for your favorite artist or whatever happened. So that's really the diligence that you need to do as artists, and not just go into things thinking, I don't want to pay for it, or, whatever. Anyway, I'm rambling now. We should talk about licensing, but I just wanted to get that across. It's because it's part of your existence, right? As being a modern songwriter online, there's all these stuff like songwriting courses and engineering courses and do this and do that and explode your fan base. And, there's a lot of stuff out there that you got to watch out for. So anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, Patrick, he said it, I'm willing to pay for results of a good product. So yeah.
So am I. Exactly.
And Melissa was asking if your course is open, or when does it open again?
So we only open it once a year. And the reason for that is that I didn't want to just be working all the time, right? At this constantly, right? I just, as much as I love doing what I do, I want to be able to spend time with the artists that I have. I don't want to, what I really mean is I don't want a continuous turnover of people. Like, I'm not trying to like shove as many people through the door as possible. So what I do is I open the program once a year. I turn away people sometimes for things like, I have the odd person who comes in, Chris, like, I don't think I can afford to work with you, but I think I can if I do this. And it's, you can tell that they're like they're on the edge financially and stuff. I'm like, no. You got to put a roof over your head, and you got to eat, and you got to afford your meat. Just next year, the year, just, it's not for you. That's the first thing. The second one is like, hey, when people are coming into I do these song reviews, a fair bit inside the Art of the Song Pitch, and also sometimes before. And if people are unsure and they send me music, sometimes I might hear someone and say, you're not ready, So I'm not an elitist. I certainly don't turn away people because, I see potential in people, and I don't say on one end that you've got to be great and you have to have sync placements before, label deal, and you got to sound super pro and go on the radio right now. And on the other end, I don't take someone who says, I don't really know how to write songs, but I want to try and learn in your course. I'm like, this is not the place for you, So I don't ask them to do it. But I do remember one really cool thing from George Martin, the manager of the Beatles, right? Producer of the Beatles. He said he signed the Beatles not because he thought they were good. And they actually weren't that good, because I had the good fortune of having Ahmet Ertegun, who founded and ran Atlantic Records, like signed Led Zeppelin to bring their name up again, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, a ton of Atlantic artists, right? From the late 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the 90s. Anyway, just before he died, he came out to one of our shows and to check my band out. We didn't get signed, and he died shortly thereafter. But one of the stories he told was his biggest regret was not signing the Beatles, because they sent over an acetate. Back then it was like a vinyl kind of cut, and he listened to it and didn't think they were that good. And they were turned down by 7 labels. George Martin, on the other hand, signed them. And the reason he said he signed them was because he said when they walked into a room, you somehow felt uplifted. And when they left, you felt diminished. And that's why he signed them. And I'm a firm believer in that. So if you have a dream and you have a will to do something with your music, make your indie music see the light of day, to actually make it happen, I am here to help you and serve you, because that's what I do. That's my calling in life. That's what I love to do. And that is the key. And even if you're not quite ready, you'll be ready by the time we get through my 6-month program, The Art of the Song Pitch. So that's the key. So yeah, so just do it once a year. I don't work with everybody. The ones I work with, we have awesome time. We get great results. And it's just a drop in the bucket of all the music out there, but it's the thing I do. And we do that every January. So it's actually coming up. We're doing opening the doors one more time in January. So, but just once a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. In fact, right along the same lines, you actually have something prepared to give away.
Yep.
Your heart for helping artists. It's completely free. Tell us a little bit about your sync guide that you prepared for all the viewers. I didn't even mention it earlier, but by the way, you get something for being here.
Yeah, it's all good. I just wanted to give you guys something that is actually valuable, right? So it's something that you can take right now and be like, thank God you gave me this, Chris, because this is going to change things. Here's the deal. One of the things among the many, many things that you need to know in sync licensing is you need to understand metadata. Metadata, some of you are like nodding, yeah, I know what that is. And some of you may not know. Be quick about this. Metadata is basically the stuff you put in your MP3, right? So when you are encoding your MP3 in a bunch of different apps, people can list the apps, their favorite app here in the chat maybe that they like to use, is you can enter information that's embedded in the MP3. So when you're submitting an MP3 to a supervisor, this sounds weird because you're thinking like, wait a minute, MP3s on TV and film, what the heck, So MP3s are the currency of the industry, meaning that's the stuff that gets sent back and forth and listened to and everything. When they finally decide to sync the music, then they ask you for the wave file. Okay, that doesn't happen to the very end. And the reason is they don't want to be sending WAV files all over the place. Like it gets super crazy, right? So you're working with MP3s all the time. It's the money or the currency of the industry. It's just the music is just all MP3s. Your MP3s have to have metadata filled out, meaning that in the MP3, you've got to enter certain information for the music supervisors to know what kind of music it is, what the title of the song is, what the duration is. Like, there's a bunch of things that you need to know. Most critically is your contact information. I don't know how many times I've heard from my music supervisor friends of they get the song, they have it saved, and then they open the MP3 2 weeks later, long after the email's gone, long after they talk to the person that they may have just met or whatever. And they open it up to find out whose song it is because they want to put it in the show, movie or ad, and there's no contact info. They don't know whose song it is. What do you think they do? You think they get on Google and start trying to track you down? No, they don't have time for that. Out the door it goes, in with a new one with metadata. Man. So you got to have your metadata filled out. Now, in the metadata, there's a bunch of fields, like a lot of them, right, that you could fill out. I created this guide for you that shows you exactly what you need to fill out or should be filling out and nothing more. It's a simple 1-page metadata guide. Print it out, put it on your wall, keep it as a document on your computer. Every time you have an MP3, pull it up, just go step by step. Oh, name, got it. Song title, got it. BPM, got it. Work your way through the guide. Every single time you have a perfect MP3 for a music supervisor. So I just wanted to give that away for you, Ryan. You've got a link for that, and you can just download it right here, I guess, right? Is that right, Ryan?
That's right. Link is in the chat, everyone. It's totally free. Just let Chris know which email to send it to, and it's all yours. Print it out, like you said. It's something that you'll just want to keep in your binder or somewhere in your room, your music creation space. So I think to end, because we've already spent an hour talking about this.
That
It
flew
just
by.
flew by, honestly. Thanks so much, by the way, for being here with us, everyone. Your questions have been wonderful. It's the questions that you type in the chat just makes the conversation so much richer. And so thanks for being here. So many familiar names and people who've been viewers and friends for a long time. It's so good to see you here on the live stream once again. To close us out, Chris, is there anything that you predict in the sync licensing world for next year that you want to share with us? So, like, what's the crystal ball saying that we need to know about sync licensing? Because we're ending the year, next year's coming, and obviously we all want next year to be fruitful and super just successful for our music careers, right? So what do you think is going to happen? What should we focus on for sync?
Right. That's a great question. So I think what I would end this on is probably talk about the small elephant in the room, which is AI, right? There's a lot of people that are worried about AI, and they keep hearing like AI, is it going to replace me as a songwriter? Is it, it's getting good at all this different stuff. And, what's the future going to hold? We don't know what that's going to be in the future. Right. And whenever I get that question, I'm always reminded of the scene in Maverick, the movie, which I saw. And there's a scene where Tom Cruise's character is trying to be ousted by this guy, his nemesis there in the Air Force. And he says, you're going to be replaced by robots. And, there's going to be no such thing as pilots anymore, right? It's all going to be drones and all that. And you're a dinosaur, essentially. And Tom Cruise's character turns to him and he says, that may be so, sir, but not today.
I love that.
And that's it. So there was like this whole .com bubble, for those of you old enough to remember that, where everyone was like in 1996 to 99, everyone was like, the internet, this new thing called the internet is going to take the world by storm. And it's going to do all this stuff. And everyone bought stocks and had apps and creating all this stuff. And the price ballooned out of the world because the internet was upon us and about to take over. And did it eventually take over? Heck yeah. We're on it right now, where this is how we're doing the call. Year 2000? No, man. People got way ahead of themselves. When ChatGPT came out, ChatGPT is going to take over my computer. It's like, well, okay, we realized it's just based on text and stuff. And now I'm not one of these naysayers. I mean, there are certainly challenges with AI and everything, but for musicians, specifically songwriters, you are in the clear, my friend, for a long ways to go. And they got to develop a much different type of AI to develop a creativity that's going to be able to do the things that could replace you. But that being said, where it is showing up and it is having an impact are starting to nibble at the bottom of production libraries. So if you get into production music, that means you're like writing for sync and you're writing these like short cut downs for parts and stuff like that, instrumentals, like catchy little hooks and stuff. And it's called production music. Essentially, it's a very specific kind of sync music. Yeah. AI is getting pretty good at making those because it's really easy to do that. It's like put a beat and come up with some little hooky part and put 3 instruments in it and make it build and cut out and boom, you're done. That's production music, and AI is starting to do that. That's not a good place for you to be going, is going into libraries for production libraries. So other than that, you are good. And 2025 will be no different in terms of the opportunities available to you and all of the things. We've had an incredible number of sync placements at Sync Songwriter just this past year, and there was a strike. There was a strike earlier, right? And even then, we were still killing it. And that is because of one thing. It's because of the relationships. It's about who you know. It literally is. So based on the relationships, you can get those relationships with supervisors. That's where it happens. Otherwise, you're out in the wild. And that's why you hear so few indie artists ever seeing the light of day, basically. So,
dude, that makes so much sense. And thanks so much, Chris. Ken posted a comment saying, thanks so much. Took plenty of notes. So Ken thanks you. And Lauren, she's just wrote a song about not being AI.
Wow, quick writer. She's got a good future ahead of her.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. Jeff is also asking, how can we apply or at least get notified when the course begins in January?
I guess, well, I mean, Ryan, this is your community. Maybe you can, send them an email out, let them know at some point,
Sure.
do that. Cause that'd be the easiest way
Yeah,
is if,
yeah.
Ryan's willing to do that. But it'll be very early January essentially. And I don't want to here's the deal. I didn't want this call to turn into like a sales call for my program. Okay. I hate that. I hate it. I wanted to come on because Ryan's like, can you come on, talk about this and help my community out, metadata and stuff like that, and a little foreshadowing of what's to come for the Art of the Song Pitch in January is cool. But I don't really want to get into that and send you off to this and that. So if Ryan feels like it's when it's time or whatever, Ryan, if you feel like sending something out, that'd be the thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeff, I know you're on the mailing list, and anyone else who wants to get notified, just join the mailing. There's so many ways to join my mailing list, but usually there's a link in the description of any video. Grab the free thing that we're giving away today. All of that helps get us in communication. And so, but Jeff, you're covered. I'll definitely let you know when the doors open for Chris's thing. So you're going to be covered, my friend.
Ryan, thank you very much. And to everybody, good job on hanging out with Ryan. He's one of the coolest people in the music space I know. So thanks so much for having me, Ryan. It was
dude, thanks for doing this. Thanks for just dropping so much wisdom, especially in this confusing but important, it's a niche in the broader music industry, but it's such a powerful one. And I'm so glad that we were able to bring your expertise here on the channel. Thanks for being here live, everyone, and for your questions. Once again, I will post the replay for people who tuned in late. So don't worry if you missed the first half of the interview with Chris. And with that, Chris, I'll definitely ask you to come back. It's just always so much value whenever you're here. So thanks again. And with that, I'll see everyone in the future on another video on the channel or in a future live stream. So thanks for being here. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Appreciate that. And hope everybody enjoys the metadata guide.
Yeah. Click the button, download it. See ya.
Bye.